Boogity, boogity, boogity! Let's go racing, boys!
It's now time for your weekly pit stop for all things racing, as we bring you full insight on the happenings in NASCAR, the latest results.
Austin Dillon wins the 60th running of the Great American Race.
And the hottest news.
We're here today to confirm the news you received this morning that I've decided to make this season my last as a NASCAR Cup driver.
So buckle up as we get ready to drop the green flag on the No Caution podcast. Now, your crew chiefs of the show, Trevor Mater and Jacob Blair. And welcome into the No Caution podcast. Trevor Mater, Jacob Blair here with you to discuss all things in the NASCAR world and in the racing world in general here. And we had a lot going on this past weekend, Jacob.
Yeah, a lot of Atlanta. I came into this show today thinking, okay, we can really just have this be about a 3-second show where we're not. Yeah. But you just can say Kevin Harvick and walk out.
Yeah,
and that's really all that needs to happen.
You know, Harvick owned Atlanta. Okay, enough said really right there. And, yeah, he pretty much did. He didn't run the Truck Series race. I feel like if he did, he could have dominated that one too. As they were, all three series were in Atlanta Motor Speedway last week. We'll go ahead and jump into what was the first race of the week. It was the Renai 250 in the Xfinity Series, and like you said, Kevin Harvick just kind of did what he wanted.
Yeah, it just seemed throughout the race Kevin Harvick was just playing with the rest of the field. He'd sit there at 2-3 seconds with Christopher Bell and Joey Logano, really the only two that had anything that you could even consider close to being close to Kevin Harvick. But you're 2.5 seconds, and then there was one point where I think the announcers were like, this is only 2.5 seconds, and then someone else came on, and it was Michael Waltrip was like, he's just playing with him, and then sure enough, in 3 laps, he's up to 4.5 seconds. Just held it there all day, maybe to make it seem a little bit more interesting than it was.
Yeah, Harvick led 141 of the 163 laps. The margin of victory was 4.18 seconds, so he kind of did whatever he wanted throughout the day. He started 5th, so it's not like he started on the pole, but it didn't take him long to get up to the lead. He took the lead on lap 17 and really kind of never, with the exception of the pit stop changes, never really relinquished it in dominating fashion. That's one of the more dominant Xfinity Series races I've seen from anybody in the last year or two.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about this with the Cup Series race as well, but just the stuff that Kevin Harvick is doing inside of that race car to make it fast at Atlanta is nobody else can match it. Everyone sees his telemetry, everyone can watch him on film. Nobody knows what he's doing there. And when I say nobody, the only person that knows it is him and his crew. Yeah, because they're setting it up. But they finally figured out, and they were showing this, where he's letting off at the second part of the dogleg and coasting like a quarter of a mile into the corner. And just coasting and coasting and coasting, and is faster than everyone else. Yeah,
and it ended up working for him in dominating fashion as well. Quick rundown of the top 10. Kevin Harvick, your race winner. Joey Logano, 2nd. Christopher Bell, 3rd. John Hunter Nemechek, 4th. Elliott Sadler, 5th. Justin Allgaier, 6th. Austin Cindric, 7th. Kyle Benjamin, 8th. Ryan Truex, 9th. And Ryan Reed in 10th. Jacob, when I look at this top 10, I look at the top 3, and I don't think it's anything super surprising. I picked Harvick to win. You picked Christopher Bell to win. Those are the 2 fastest cars throughout most of the day. Logano got by Bell in the closing laps.
That's because Bell got into the wall.
Yep, and he tends to do that sometimes. But when you look at like a guy like John Hunter Nemechek in 4th, here's a guy who made his first ever Xfinity Series start. Started 3rd, held his own most of the race, was never really a threat to win it, but you got to think he was pretty pleased coming away with the top 5.
Anytime you can do that in your first Xfinity start, especially when all you've really ever done NASCAR-wise is trucks, the difference between those two is monumental. And one of the couple of the good things you saw in him is early, Kevin Harvick got right up behind a spoiler, and I thought John Hunter was going to wreck. It was like on lap 6, 7, 8, right around there, right before there was that incident with Cole Custer. But he hung on to that race car, which at Atlanta is even tougher when it gets that sideways to hang on to. He hung on to it, and then there was obviously that incident with him, Elliott Sadler, and Cole Custer that knocked Cole Custer out of the race, who had a fast car as well, probably would have been inside the top 7 or 8 if that didn't happen. But overall, good run for John Hunter Nemechek.
Hey, when you look at the rest of the field, some guys didn't have the runs that I'm sure they were hoping for. Ty Dillon ends up finishing in 13th. I thought maybe he'd be a little bit more of a factor. He's ran pretty well at Atlanta in the trucks in the Xfinity Series. The Daytona winner, Tyler Reddick, he comes home in 19th. He finished a lap down. And, I mean, those guys, Cole Custer, as you mentioned, he got caught up in an accident. It wasn't really his own doing there, but definitely not the finish I'm sure he was hoping for.
Yeah, and another one I think was hoping for a little bit of a better run, started sixth, was Daniel Hemrick. He kind of faded. He ran well early, faded late in the race, and then was just hung right around the top 10, ended up finishing 11th. And then as well as Brandon Jones, who started 7th. He fell back pretty early and struggled most of the day as well.
Yeah, so we're 2 races into the Xfinity season, and when you look right now at the point standings, reminder that the top 12 in the Xfinity Series, they go on to their version of the playoffs. And I know it's really early right now, but a quick look at your standings. If the postseason started today, your playoff drivers would be Elliott Sadler, Tyler Reddick, Ryan Reed, Ryan Truex, Spencer Gallagher, Christopher Bell, Justin Allgaier, Ross Chastain, Kaz Gralla, Brandon Jones, Daniel Hemrick, and Garrett Smithley. Notable ones out would be Matt Tifft, Austin Cindric in those. And then you got guys like Kyle Benjamin and John Hunter Nemechek. They're 15th and 16th in points. They're not even running full seasons right now, but it's early.
Yeah, and, well, they're not going to run enough races where they're going to be able to.
It's not going to matter.
It's not going to matter because we know, John Hunter, that car is going to be shared with Kyle Larson, who's running that car this weekend at Vegas, and with
Benjamin sharing with
Benjamin,
Busch, and
he's got that car. Probably, I think, is Ryan Preece probably going to be in
probably
that car
in
a little bit as
the
well,
short tracks, yeah.
So those guys won't be a factor points-wise, but every time they get in those cars, we'll see them up front.
When you look right now, like I said, the top 12, any of them that really, really stick out to you, disappointing-wise, or kind of like, wow, I can't believe they're in the top 12? Like I said, though, we're only 2 weeks in.
Well, and meaning that first race was Daytona,
Yeah.
you really it doesn't get too surprising to see where they are, and you just kind of got to wait. You really don't want to start looking at points really until about week 5.
Yeah.
That's when you can really start seeing a picture of how the season's starting to shake up. But week 2, there's really no reason to look at where anyone is because it's 2 weeks and one of them was Daytona.
Yeah, well, the real season started last week, as I've always said. But when you look at it right now, kind of the usual suspects, I think Sadler up there, Christopher Bell didn't have a good run at Daytona. He had a really good run in Atlanta, and that shows he's 6th in the points. So, I mean, there's a quick look at your Xfinity standings and kind of what went on in the Xfinity Series. Like you said, it wasn't a ton to talk about in that race. Not because it wasn't like it was a boring race. It's just like what Harvick did in that race was just unbelievable.
Yeah, and just the way he hooks the yellow line at Atlanta, which at Atlanta's in a really weird position. It's not actually the bottom of the racetrack. So to get to the bottom of the racetrack, you're running under the yellow line, and it just seems like Kevin Harvick understands that and is able to get there better than everyone else. And that yellow line in a race car driver's head, it's hard to tell yourself, okay, go below it.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen it some tracks before where like Chicago and Kansas where guys have started to go totally below it, and that seems to be a fast groove.
Yeah, and it's just because you're right there on the edge. And a lot of times in these race cars, if you just get a little bit of it on the apron, it'll hook the car and it'll help it turn. And Kevin Harvick really seems to have figured it out. And you'll see that at other racetracks where guys will get on that apron just a little bit. They don't want to get it too much. And it's where, with the way these cars are yawed out and skewed out, where the rear end is actually kicked out while they're turning. They're not actually loose. That's just the way the cars are set up, where only the left front tire is on that apron, and it really helps the car hook and turn and get around the corner.
And that's something I think with Kevin Harvick kind of just came with experience. You look at the amount of times he's ran in the Cup Series of Atlanta, and obviously the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. He's ran a lot more races in Atlanta than maybe 10 or 12 of these young guys combined easily.
Yeah, that's one thing about Atlanta is they're only there once a year.
Yeah, nowadays.
We used to be there twice, so that's why Kevin Harvick's going to get a lot more experience than all these younger guys. And similar guys of his age that went there twice when they were, but now they only go once, so these younger guys don't have the opportunity to work at probably one of the toughest tracks on the circuit.
Yeah, it's an interesting track. We'll kind of get into that a little bit more later on in the show, but let's jump in into, I thought this was really cool they did this, by the way, how they do the Xfinity Series, and they basically jump right into the Truck Series. I thought that was really, really cool how they did that.
And looking at the crowds for both of those races, I think it helped boost those crowd numbers a little bit. I know it's still not, it's a little deceptive when you've got this entire front stretch of stands and only the dogleg section is filled, but it still seemed like there was a good crowd for both of those races, and I think putting them back to back helps with that.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. I wonder if eventually we'll see more tracks kind of use that template. But let's move on to the Camping World Truck Series race that took place immediately after that, the Active Pest Control 200, and that was a lot different than the Xfinity race. It was a lot more wild and a little bit more entertaining.
Yeah, probably. And we talked about this. Is the truck race always seems to be most of the time the most exciting race of the weekend. This weekend it did it again. And even though we had Kyle Busch in this race, he never really. He had control of it,
but he never
dominated it. We watched Noah Gragson dominate the first segment, and then he had problems. And with the trucks, the pit crews aren't necessarily the top guys, and there's a lot of shuffling and a lot of strategy, and the stages are shorter, and it just always seems to provide a really entertaining race.
Well, and I think what helps with this too is I think the trucks are probably more balanced as far as competition-wise than maybe at the Xfinity or definitely the Cup level. I think that kind of plays a part in it too. There's not as big of a discrepancy between a 12th place car or a 12th place truck and a first place truck in the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, and one thing about that this year is the new Ilmor engine package that they are offering to these truck teams. I don't know quite all the details about the specs on the engine, but it's similar to the way the ARCA series works, where it's this engine that comes from Ilmor. It's a spec engine, so if ThorSport gets one, and then say someone like Jordan Anderson has one, they know we've pretty much got the same engine in these trucks, and that's why I think we've seen even the first two races, we've seen the gap between the back teams and guys up front, where guys like Stuart Friesen and Jesse Little and Parker Kligerman, his truck has gotten more competitive. You see these guys that were finishing 20th, 19th, 18th, now they're able to run up front.
Yeah, it was, like you said, a very entertaining race, and I think a big reason why the Truck Series is also one of the more entertaining races of the week. Most weeks is some of these guys they're young, they're inexperienced, and they're with the exception of a guy like a Kyle Busch or a Matt Crafton or a Johnny Sauter, there's not a ton of difference in experience from a Myatt Snyder to a Noah Gragson when it comes to the handling the trucks, or Ben Rhodes or guys like that, and it's kind of cool because you gotta get to see some of the future faces of the sports at a really, really ripe age.
Yeah, and guys like Ben Rhodes, they're veterans of the truck series.
Yeah,
it's his third year, and he's 21
veteran.
years old or 20 years old, and because I think he came in when he was 18.
Ben Rhodes is 20. We just turned 21 last week.
Yeah, so this is his third year in the truck series. So when you're talking about your third year and having that much more experience than everyone else, you've got a lot of ripe young guys, and even guys like Grant Enfinger. He's got a lot of experience now in the truck series, and they're still all young.
Justin Haley. I mean, he's had quite a bit of experience in the truck series. So, Cameron. I'm thinking Cameron Haley, not Justin Haley. But Justin Haley's ran 30 races in the last 3.5 years. So,
and that's the one thing about the truck series is these kids can get in these cars and these trucks at Martinsville when they're 15. Mm-hmm. They can't run on anything bigger than 1.25-mile racetrack, but they can start running truck races. So Justin Haley was running truck races when he was 15, 16, 17, getting 2 or 3 in a year, mm-hmm. where now when he comes into the series at 18, 19, he's ready to go.
And we saw that kind of benefit some of the guys that are moving up. Now you look at Chase Elliott. He was 16 or 17 when he got into the truck series. John Hunter Nemechek, Cole Custer. It's really helped those guys, and I've done a 180 on the truck series. 5 or 6 years ago, when it was Ron Hornaday and Todd Bodine and Johnny Benson and those guys, I was kind of like, man, like this is really just kind of the guys that weren't good enough to exceed at the next level, and they've just kind of retreaded back there. But now when you look at the young guys in this lineup, Noah Gragson, for example, Myatt Snyder, who's 22, 23 years old. He's one of the older guys in the truck series, and he's 23 years old. Brett Moffitt. I mean, Brett Moffitt's 25. So, I mean, it's fun to watch, and it's really, really entertaining.
Well, and one thing on that is, where are the truck champions at from the last several years now?
We look Christopher Bell. He's up. Eric Jones. He's also Cup Series. I mean, you have to have Johnny Sauter and Matt Crafton.
But then even before that, you had Austin Dillon win a truck championship.
I believe Kurt Busch won one, or was it Greg Biffle that won it?
I think it was Biffle.
Yeah, let's go. So let's go back. Austin Dillon, James Buescher, and then you have to go a little bit back, Greg Biffle and those guys. So you look at the last couple of years, and you can make the same argument with the Xfinity Series. Look at William Byron. Daniel Suarez, Chris Buescher. And I think that was the beauty of them taking away the opportunity of allowing these Cup guys to run for championships, is it opened the door up for a guy like a Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Austin Dillon, those guys to go out and show themselves and win a title.
Yeah, because it's one thing to win a bunch of races. It's another thing to win a championship. That proves consistency, and that's really what you want in the Cup Series. If you're someone that, you won 6 races, but you finished 4th in the standings, that's not necessarily what you want in the Cup Series. So watching someone win championships but then get the recognition for actually doing it because they're not racing Cup guys points-wise really helps those drivers out.
Well, and you mentioned the consistency. William Byron, his 1 full year in the Truck Series, that was William Byron. Win a race, wreck a race. Win a race, wreck a race. And then, so I think he had 6 or 7 wins that year and blew a motor at Phoenix. Didn't make the championship 4. Turns around the next year, a little bit more consistent. Is able to get the Xfinity Series title. So I enjoy it. I don't mind it being a feeder system to the Cup and Xfinity, and I don't mind the Xfinity being kind of like the AA or AAA for the Cup Series when you get these young talents and you kind of get to introduce them to the fans. I like it a lot more than back in the day when you'd have 12 or 13 Cup Series guys come out there, and your whole top 5 or 6 might be Cup Series guys. I mean, that's just how I feel about it.
And before we move on real quick, we kind of were talking about the Truck Series. We never really went over how this race ended. Kyle Busch was leading this truck race, come down on a late race pit stop after I think it was Josh Riome crashed on the back straightaway. And they all come down pit road, and Kyle Busch comes down pit road, and there's some struggles on the right side, and we can debate what happened, whether the call was for 2 tires on the top of the pit box or inside the race car. I'm one that thinks Kyle Busch just decided to take off. And the rear tire changer had already started taking off the left rear tire while they were messing with the right front. When the jack dropped on the right side, Kyle Busch takes off while the lug nuts were not on that left rear tire. The tire comes off, and that sets up a wild finish because Myatt Snyder only took 2 tires. He started on the pole, put Johnny Sauter on the outside, and then there was good old Brett Moffitt just lying in wait in that 3rd position. Yeah,
that was a wild finish. And going back to what you said about Kyle Busch, when you watch that pit stop, I didn't watch it live, but I went back and I watched the race after its conclusion. And when he makes that pit stop, you can see as soon as they say go, 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 the back tire changer is going, no, they're not. He knows at that point that they're not on right, and I bet he had to feel like the worst person in the world, knowing what the end result was going to be was that the lug nuts weren't on, and they ended up losing a tire out of it.
And this is one of those where I think today the penalties came out, and I think the crew chief, the jackman, and that rear tire changer on Kyle Busch's truck have all been suspended 3 races for that incident. I don't agree with that because if there's no way to prove that Kyle Busch made that decision inside the car, which is where I think it came from, I think he said, I'm leaving. This is taking too long. I'm not losing this race. If he made that decision to leave, I don't know if you suspend those guys. But I guess that's the rules. And 3 races is a lot in the Truck Series. I know he brought he's brought some of the Cup guys over, but 3 races is a lot for
Yep, I have that in front of me. Crew Chief Marcus Richmond II, rear tire changer Coleman Dollarhide, which is an awesome name, by the way, and Jackman Ernie Pierce have been suspended for the next 3 Camping World Truck Series events. And I'm with you. I'm not a big fan of suspending these guys for loose tires or missing lug nuts or anything like that. I don't know. Maybe it's just me kind of being kind of a free spirit and not caring as much, but I'm not a huge fan of that to begin with. And you look at this situation where I'm with you. I tend to lean towards, I think Kyle Busch was like, screw it. This is already taking longer than it should. I want to at least have an opportunity to win the race. I don't think he wins the race anyways. I think he had too far to go. And we saw that Brett Moffitt wasn't afraid to do anything. But I don't like that call.
Yeah, and speaking of Brett Moffitt, for his second win of his career and a big win for Shiggy Hattori Racing to get their first win in the Truck Series. They've been really working on that program for a while. But another 3-wide move. You go back to Michigan 2 years ago when he put that move on his teammate 3-wide into a small groove Michigan because it was still kind of newly repaved. Made an insane move that race, comes back, makes another really, really good move and gets another win, and that is Brett Moffitt. But just Brett Moffitt is someone that has impressed me for a while that's never really gotten an opportunity to drive for a top team consistently for a whole season. So now that he's with a decent truck, it maybe not be a Kyle Busch truck or a Thor Sport truck, but the 16 truck proved this weekend it's got a lot of speed. So it's good to see him in a truck that he can probably contend for a championship with.
Yeah, Brett Moffitt, a native of Grimes, Iowa, picks up his second Camping World Truck Series win, and the important thing is assuming they run a full season, he's in the playoffs. I mean, unless we have more than 8 winners that are points eligible, and I don't know if that happens. I don't think it's crazy to say that, but I don't know if that happens. But, I mean, he's in the playoffs, it looks like, at least this point.
Well, I think, anyways, they're going to get enough points that even if there are more than 8 winners, he will go ahead and find his way in the playoffs.
Yeah, so a good win for Brett Moffitt to pick up the win. Quick rundown of the rest of the top 10 in that Camping World Truck Series race. Noah Gragson, 2nd. Johnny Sauter, 3rd. Ben Rhodes, 4th. Matt Crafton, 5th. Stuart Friesen, 6th. Myatt Snyder, 7th. Jesse Whittle, 8th. Grant Empfinger, 9th, and Austin Dillon, 10th. And Jacob, I know you kind of talked about him last week, and I've really kind of grown a liking to this guy as well, and that's Stuart Friesen. When you look at what he's done in the last 7 or 8 races, he's been running really, really well, and I think he's kind of getting comfortable with that car and getting comfortable with the Camping World Truck Series, and he's a guy that it really would not surprise me that much if he peels off a win sometime this season.
And he's a guy that has come from the big block modified ranks out in New York and the New England area where those guys run. Was really good out there in those cars, and then has transferred into the trucks. And I think that's why we saw him at Eldora last year.
Yeah.
Probably should have won that race.
Yeah, no, he had the best truck most of the night in that race, and Experience won that race late for Matt Crafton.
But not only has he gotten better on asphalt, but that team seems to have more speed inside of that race car. And then real quick, one other trucks. We're talking trucks. Yeah. One other truck I want to talk about is the Austin Dillon and that 20 truck. They announced before this race that I guess was the Dillon brothers are going to start a race team partnering with Young Motorsports, who also owns the O2. So then Ty, Austin, and then the one I'm really intrigued to see run a couple races, I think it was Tanner Thorson, who is a big sprint car and midget guy, is going to run some truck races in that 20 car this year. 20 truck this year.
It gets confusing, doesn't it?
Always.
Yeah, no, I catch myself doing that too. I think that'll be interesting as well. Jesse Whittle, I like seeing Jesse Whittle in the top 10. He's another kid that's kind of still learning in the truck series, and I think we'll see him come around. Myatt Snyder, like you said, he gambled with the 2 tires, which I don't know that he had a truck to win the race. So, I mean, why not in that case? Why not shake the dice and hope maybe something crazy happens that helps you?
And he was either outside the top 10 or right around 10th, 9th all race long. So why not take that shot? He only ended up falling to 7th, so ended up working out in his favor.
And we'll look at, I know, like we said earlier with the Xfinity, we're only 2 races in. Standings don't really mean a whole hell of a lot right now, but it's just kind of, I think it's important to go over them. The top 8 in the Camping World Truck Series qualify for the postseason. Johnny Sauter, he is well in control of the points lead right now, and he has a win. So, as if there was any question before, I'd be willing to bet money that Johnny Sauter is probably going to end up in the playoffs. Matt Crafton is in 2nd. Grant Empfinger 3rd. He's a guy that runs really well at certain tracks, so he's a guy to keep an eye on. Noah Gragson in 4th. Brett Moffitt 5th with a win. Ben Rhodes 6th. Dalton Sargent tied with him in 6th. And Spencer Davis in 8th. Just outside of the top 8 is Joe Nemechek, Justin Haley, Stuart Friesen, and Myatt Snyder. So there's your top 12 in the standings after 2 races.
And real quick with those, I don't believe Spencer Davis is slated to run the whole truck season, so he'll fall out, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Stuart Friesen move his way into at least in a points-paying playoff position.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And if he can get himself in a situation where he can get a win, too, then, I mean, that's almost – a win is basically a lock to get in the playoffs, and 2 wins is a lock. I mean, because there's not going to be many. And I'm looking at it now, according to the team chart from jski.com. Yeah, Spencer Davis is going to split that ride with Brandon Jones, Harrison Burden, and Riley Herbst. So you will see him drop out of the top 8 in time. But he's had a couple good runs here so far early on in the season for him, and we'll see what they do with that truck the rest of the way. I don't remember if he's on the entry list for that or not this week. As I look at it, no, but it's Kyle Busch. Yep, Kyle Busch is in it. But he's in the 4 truck. So maybe they're going to do something where he runs. And you'll see teams do this sometimes too. If there's someone like him that has a couple of really good races at the beginning of the season, maybe keep him in there longer, because I don't know that originally he was supposed to be in that 4 truck. I think they were going to kind of switch between Kyle Busch, David Gilliland, and David Gilliland's son Todd. So I don't know, maybe.
And well, looking at what the entry list for this week, Spencer Davis is in the 4 car. I'm sure. Yeah, Spencer Davis in the 4. Kyle Busch in the 51, and then obviously Noah Gragson in the 18. It's going to get confusing keeping track where all these guys are, those KBM trucks. Yeah,
when you look at it, we'll talk more about the truck series here in a little bit, but you look at the entry list, Kyle Busch is the only non-points guy really that is in there. Joe Nemechek, I think, is running for points this year in the truck series, and John Hunter Nemechek also in there this week. But we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. We'll make our predictions for those. But I wanted to talk about we'll jump into what Jacob wanted to talk about first, since we've been talking about Atlanta Motor Speedway, and then we'll get to what I want to talk about.
Yeah, and I don't think we've really recapped Atlanta quite yet for the Cup Series, but there's not a whole lot to recap. Is the veterans did well, the rookies and the younger guys struggled. Kevin Harvick ran the bottom of the racetrack and just put a whooping on everybody.
Yeah, Kevin Harvick owns Atlanta Motor Speedway at this point. It looks like it's watching him do that is just incredible. The way he, like you talked about, the way he understands Atlanta. I compare it to like when you watch Jimmy Johnson at Dover or Martin Truex at Charlotte, something like that. It's just crazy how good Kevin Harvick is at that track, and I don't understand it. I think, like I said earlier, I think it comes with experience. But you look at the last couple races at Atlanta in the Cup Series, he had the best car, and it led like an average of 140 laps per race, had no wins to show for it. He came out on Sunday and took care of business.
Yeah, and last week we went on and on and on about the young guys in this sport, and then I want to run through the top 8 real quick. Kevin Harvick, Brad Keselowski, Clint Bowyer, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, and then Kurt Busch.
Well, Joey Logano is still kind of young.
But this is what, his 10th year?
10th full-time, yes.
So the young guys, the Kyle Larsons and Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Eric Jones, and Ryan Blaney, they all ran decent, but then guys like Daniel Suarez, William Byron, Alex Bowman, those guys struggled, and even before Darrell Wallace ended up in that mess that Trevor Bayne tried to make everything interesting for everybody. Kevin Harvick wasn't having any of it, but even before that, Darrell Wallace struggled quite a bit at Atlanta. So just the younger guys, and it's a track where the experience is going to pay off, learning how to save tires at a track like Atlanta. It really hurt the younger guys this weekend. Yeah,
and this is one of the tracks that experience is the most important. Like you said, you look at the top 8, all those guys, I believe, have ran at least 10 races in Atlanta. So, yeah, they definitely have the experience. Kevin Harvick led 181 laps, which is over half the race, and we just put on a clinic.
Well, and the only reason he didn't lead more is because there was some different strategy guys were using to. Guys were like, we got to try something. We are not going to beat him straight up. So guys like Denny Hamlin and I think it was Joey Logano, they went off strategy, and then other guys were trying. Everyone was trying different stuff. So I think Harvick would easily have led over 200 laps if those guys didn't try to, because what was going on is Atlanta, the tires wear so quickly, you want to get tires before your whole fuel run is out. So the guys up front were short pitting.
Well, and we saw Denny Hamlin do that late in the race.
And what Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano were doing is they tried to do it. They backtracked the race and said, we're going to try to do it in 2 stops instead of 3, while everyone else was trying 3, but the tires just were so much better when you put fresh tires on that it didn't work.
Quick look at the top 10 in last week's Quick Trip Folds of Honor 500. Kevin Harvick picks up the win. Brett Keselowski 2nd, Clint Bowyer 3rd, Denny Hamlin 4th, Martin Truex Jr. 5th, Joey Logano 6th, Kyle Busch 7th, Kurt Busch 8th, Kyle Larson 9th, Chase Elliott 10th. Some guys that kind of struggled. Ryan Newman, here's a guy that started 2nd, led the early stages of the race and kind of fell back. He ends up finishing 22nd. And then so far this season, just about anything that can go wrong for Jimmy Johnson has gone wrong.
It's kind of had that feel the last couple years as well. As it takes him a while to get going, and it feels that way a little bit this year. I don't think there's anything to worry about with Jimmy Johnson.
And there's people who will probably say, oh, well, Jimmy's lost it or he's taking a step back. Well, Daytona's Daytona. I mean, that you can't take anything from that race and really kind of logically put it into your expectations for the year. And Jimmy has two types of races at Daytona, either wins or wrecks. There's no in between. And then Atlanta's another track that he either wins or he wrecks. And this week he wrecked. He runs a lot better at Las Vegas. It's one of his favorite tracks on the circuit. And like you said, I don't think there's anything to worry about with Jimmy Johnson. But when you look right now, he's like 33rd in the standings after two races. Who would have thought that?
Nobody. And one other thing I want to talk about before we get to our next little bit here is the Fords this year. They were really fast at Daytona, and everyone was kind of like, well, let's see what happens at Atlanta. Well, the Fords were really fast again. I know Kevin Harvick's in a Ford, but, I mean, the top three were all Fords. There were five Fords five Fords in the top 10. And not all of them were Stewart-Haas Fords. The Fords are really fast this year. I think that's going to continue at Las Vegas this weekend.
And speaking of Stewart-Haas Racing, this is a team that has really surprised me throughout the season. Because you look back at last year, Kurt Busch wins the Daytona 500, but really other than that, he didn't really do anything. Quentin Boyer had some really, really good runs. He wasn't as consistent as they would have liked him to have been. And then Kevin Harvick's his own animal. And then you had Danica Patrick, who, well, she was there. But you look at this year, Eric Almirola is half a lap away from winning the Daytona 500. Kurt Busch was up there until he got caught up in a wreck. Then you go to this week, Kevin Harvick dominates. Clint Boyer finishes 3rd. Kurt Busch finishes 8th. And Eric Almirola stayed around that top 10 to 12 margin all day long, ends up finishing 13th.
Well, and Kurt Busch also led 52 laps in this race as well. And really, I was a little bit surprised with the performance Clint Boyer put in. He ran top 5 all day long. But one funny thing that I thought was funny that happened pre-race, before this race, is I think it was Michael Waltrip's grid walk, which is sometimes is really, really bad, but sometimes is pretty funny. And I think he talked to Kurt Busch, and Kurt Busch basically said, "We have Kevin Harvick's telemetry. I've looked at exactly what he's doing. I still can't do it. There's nothing anybody can do to touch him in Atlanta."
I saw that too. I thought that was kind of funny. I think those segments they can be funny, but they can be really awkward. Did you see the one last year with the All-Star race when he had the stupid camera attached to his head and he was walking up people with the briefcase full of money? I thought that was really stupid. But I thought that Sunday was kind of funny, and what Kurt Busch said, they have the same stuff, and a lot of these teams, a lot of these manufacturers have gotten to where they do that. Definitely like Toyota. Toyota shares just about everything that they have. So chances are if Kyle Busch has it, then chances are so does Martin Truex Jr. And we've kind of seen that where Toyotas have took over last year. Maybe this is a year for the Fords. I don't know. We're only 2 weeks in, but the way they've ran and how fast they've been all the first 2 races, might not be crazy to say this will be the year that Ford kind of takes control.
Yeah, they've been strong, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, no, I would be stunned if it did. Real quick, again, we'll just jump into the standings after 2 races. The 16 teams make the playoffs in the Cup Series. If the playoffs started today, which is a good thing they don't, it would be Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, Clint Boyer, Austin Dillon. Dillon and Harvick both have wins. Martin Truex Jr., Kurt Busch, Paul Menard, Eric Almirola, Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, Kyle Larson, Darrell Wallace Jr., Michael McDowell, and Ryan Newman. Do you think Michael McDowell makes the playoffs?
No.
Unless he wins it like a restrictor plate.
Nothing against Michael McDowell, but yeah, unless he wins a either rain-shortened race or a restrictor plate race, that's all we'll see. We won't see him in there. Well, Jimmy Johnson will probably be the guy to replace.
Well, and you look at the guys that this situation on the outside looking in that I think have a legitimate shot of making it in. Chase Elliott. He's 19th right now. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has been running crazy well at restrictor plates. Jamie McMurray's a guy that runs really well at road courses and at restrictor plates. Eric Jones, William Byron, Daniel Suarez, and Jimmy Johnson currently right now, he is 35th in points Mark Thompson, who ran the Daytona 500 and did not run last week, is 32nd in points. So he's ahead of Jimmy Johnson right now.
Yeah, but what it's setting up is even 2 races in is we can already see, we talked about this a little bit last week, is we are going to have a mess getting 16 teams into the playoffs this year, because a lot of times we're sitting there at the end of the season going, there's really only 11 teams that deserve to be here. I think this year we're going to go, okay, there are 22 teams that could make it in, and we're just going to have to see what happens.
I mean, when I look at the top 16 right now, Logano, Blaney, Hamlin, Harvick, Boyer, Dillon, Truex, Busch, I think all 8 of those guys legitimately have a chance. Paul Menard, I'm not sure. I got to see more from that team. The way Eric Almirola's ran the first 2 weeks, you can make an argument for him. Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, Kyle Larson. Bubba Wallace, I don't know they'll be consistent enough. But then again, when there's 16 teams out of 37 or whatever that show up, and 34 of them on a weekly basis, I think Bubba Wallace has a chance to maybe sneak in. Michael McDowell, like you said, barring a restrictor play race or a range short race, I don't see it. Ryan Newman has tracks that he runs really well at, like Phoenix. Alex Bowman runs really well at Phoenix. Chase Elliott, Ricky Stenhouse. I mean, yeah, there's 23 guys I think that could be fighting for 16 spots.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting season. I think it's going to be one of the more dramatic seasons we've seen with this whole new chase format.
Yeah, how long do you think it'll be before we see a repeat winner this year?
A long time.
Do you have it happening? Do you think it's going to happen this week?
No.
Okay, yeah, I don't think it will either. Did you go back to last year? We did not have a repeat winner until week 6 when Brad Keselowski won at Martinsville. The year before, there was a repeat winner in week 5 when Jimmy Johnson won, and in 2015 there was a repeat winner in week 4 when Kevin Harvick won. So I would say, looking at this, I would say probably week 6 or 7.
Yeah, if it's going to happen, I think the winner of Martinsville is going to be someone that already won. That's
if a guy like a Brad Keselowski or Joey Logano get a win before now and then, because you look Las Vegas, Phoenix, Fontana, Kyle Larson's ran really, really well at Fontana. That would probably be who I tend to lean. Phoenix, Kevin Harvick runs really well at Phoenix. So that's maybe one guy that could sneak by. But there's other guys who run really well there too. And we'll preview that race next week. They're in Las Vegas this week, and it'll be an exciting one. But we want to talk about a couple other things real quick before we go ahead and make our predictions for this week. I know there's one thing Jacob wanted to talk about with the Atlanta Motor Speedway.
Yeah, every year, because it's been, I think, 21 years, 1997 since Atlanta has been repaved. After the race, it becomes the debate of when does Atlanta need repaved. And I'm kind of someone that says I don't want it repaved, except for the fact that Kevin Harvick stinks up the show. If you repave it, you're going to throw everything Kevin Harvick's worked for out of the window. But that being said, I don't want it repaved. I don't want it touched. I think having one racetrack that's like that, where it just eats up tires and makes guys work harder. Yes, it spreads everybody out. Yes, everyone has to find grooves, but it's just a different style of race that is fun to watch. And one thing that TV does not do Atlanta justice is if you're there. I've never been there, but I can imagine what it's like is watching these guys hang on to these race cars, because they are sliding around 5 laps into a run, and then they got to do it for 35 more. And I don't want to see it repaved. I know they're going to have to do it at some point, but just having one track that's that old that eats up tires that much would be good to keep on the schedule. Well,
and the banking of this track too is kind of adds to that, I think. So I'm with you. I don't see it's not like the asphalt is crumbling. I don't think they need to repave it. At some point it'll happen, and I think it could happen soon. But I'm with you. I would be okay if they didn't repave it.
And I think it might come to something like we saw at Daytona, which is where they weren't going to touch that racetrack, but then one year the track starts falling apart and potholes forming it, and they're kind of going, well, we got to repave it now.
We don't really have a choice.
And until that starts happening in Atlanta, I don't think they will, and I don't think they should touch it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. There were some, we're a little bit behind the curve on these comments, but it's something that we didn't get a chance to touch on last week, but I wanted to touch on this week, and that would be Denny Hamlin's comments that he made on a Barstool podcast. You ever listen to Barstool?
I do not.
I don't mind Barstool. Some of their stuff for me is just a little bit too far out there. But Denny Hamlin was on a Barstool podcast a couple weeks ago, and Barstool is really good at the kind of getting you to say stuff that you probably shouldn't say. And they haven't done this to just Denny Hamlin. And they asked Denny Hamlin, do NASCAR drivers use Adderall? And he said, yeah. And they asked how, a percentage of how many, and he said 70%, which I think that number is totally misguided. I mean, I don't foresee that having any actual backing to it. I think he just I think he was trying to be funny, and to be fair, they were kind of pressuring him into answering the question. But just what did you take away from this whole weird saga, debacle, whatever you want to call it?
To me, I just kind of go like, just shut your mouth. You don't have to answer this question and say something that is going to cause this weird. It's not even necessarily a bad situation. It's just weird.
No, it did upset a lot of drivers in the garage area. Bubba Wallace, for one in particular, really had some interesting things to say about it. I kind of enjoy this whole Bubba Wallace, Denny Hamlin spat because it's so petty. I mean, when you look at it, and what Bubba Wallace, they had an incident on the last lap of the Daytona 500. Wallace made a remark about Adderall in his post-race interview, which I missed. I don't know how I missed that, but I did. Denny Hamlin responds by kicking Bubba Wallace off of his charity basketball team.
There was a little bit more that happened before that. They were caught, having not, they weren't fighting, but a verbal fight in the garage area after the Daytona 500, after all these comments were made. And then Denny Hamlin gets on Twitter and explains everything that he thinks happened on the racetrack. And you watch that incident at Daytona. They just side-drafted each other, came together, and then to me it looks like, it's very possible Denny Hamlin blew a right front tire and couldn't steer, and they both ended up in the wall. We don't know, but they had that. And then of course, like you said, Denny Hamlin kicks Darrell Wallace out of Denny Hamlin's basketball league, which Darrell Wallace thankfully let us all know during the rain delay at Atlanta.
Yeah, that to me that's the most pathetic part about this whole thing. I think that's even worse than the comments, is that was how he responded to it, was, you know what, screw you, Darrell. How dare you bad talk me for something stupid I said. You're off my charity basketball team. So, I don't know, that whole thing was just weird. I think it was just kind of him trying to be funny, and I think that has any backing to it whatsoever? No. There's been one positive Adderall test in the last 5 years, and that was AJ Allmendinger. And we saw the backlash of that, and it took him 2 years to rebuild his career. He lost the best ride of his life, and now he's at JTG Racing, which is still a decent team, but he went from Penske, had to jump through all the hoops and stuff, and that was, for everything I've read about AJ Allmendinger, that was a one-off mistake. It wasn't an habitual thing. He had taken something that he was told was an energy pill, which Adderall is an energy pill. It will give you plenty of energy and keep you focused, but it was on the NASCAR banned substance list, and it's taken him forever to get his career back to a respectful point. So I don't buy into that statistic whatsoever.
Yeah, if 70% of drivers were on Adderall, I think we'd see some more positive tests. I don't think everyone would get caught, because we know how all this stuff works in other sports, but we'd see every once in a while guys getting caught.
Yeah, I mean, NASCAR might have the best problem when it comes to drugs, because they don't really have one. I mean, every once in a while there'll be a guy, they'll test positive, like an AJ Allmendinger. That's really the last one in the Cup Series that sticks out to me. There were some guys in the Xfinity Series, like a Shane Meal or a Tyler Walker or Aaron Fike that had troubles. But for the most part, NASCAR tends to be pretty drug-free, and those guys test frequently and stuff. They test enough that I think NASCAR would detect what happens. Because I think the difference between, say, NASCAR and even the NBA or professional football is, if a guy is on something and it's covered up or it's not detected and he's not punished for it, he's not putting other people in danger the same way someone is when they get behind the wheel of a race car and are going 200 miles an hour. Yeah, I mean,
that is the biggest thing, is you can't be on anything in a race car, because you need your head completely cleared as much as is physically possible, as in don't put anything in your system that's going to cause trouble with that. And NASCAR knows that, and they're going to do everything they can to make sure these drivers are safe on the racetrack.
Yeah, so I think it was just stupid of him to say. He shouldn't have said it. And he's kind of slowly became one of the more hated guys in NASCAR over the last year. And some of it he's done to himself, really. When you look back at the incident with Chase Elliott last year at Martinsville, the whole thing with Bubba Wallace and the comments.
Well, and I know with what happened with him at Martinsville with Chase, and it's not really what's made him become, kind of the villain of NASCAR. Is not what he's necessarily done on the racetrack. I don't think wrecking Chase is what made him the villain. It's how he has handled these situations, what he said that have really caused this issue. And with it being Denny Hamlin, I don't think he's a guy that can embrace that role. Which, if you've got a villain, you want a villain, but it's not Denny Hamlin that needs to be that. He doesn't have the personality to be that villain, and he's trying to not be, and then he just keeps saying stuff that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, you look at Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch embraces it. He kind of embraces being the bad guy. Rusty Wallace grew to embrace being the bad guy. Darrell Waltrip embraced being the bad guy. Denny Hamlin's not that. I think he's just a doofus. I mean, with some of the stuff he says and does, I don't think that Denny Hamlin is trying to be the most hated guy in NASCAR. I don't think maybe he is. I don't know. I mean, it's just the way he's gone about things. And I think too, when you look at what happened in Martinsville, when he got into it with Chase Elliott, a guy who his popularity has risen, and I'm not 110% sure why. I think it's a combination of he races for Hendrick and his last name. And his dad was always like that. I mean, I think the kid's got it all. But it's just interesting that he's had such a rise in popularity that just that one action turned a lot of people against Denny Hamlin.
Yeah. It's Denny Hamlin does not want to be that guy. We've seen that.
No.
And it's causing these interesting things. And like I said, Kyle Busch is a guy that is fine with being that. There was something, and I don't remember what week it was or where they were doing this little thing where they were asking drivers these questions on a little feature, a pre-race feature, and one of the questions was, which NASCAR driver do you hate the most? And they were going through all these different drivers, and all these drivers were plead the fifth. I'm not going to say anything. They go to Kyle Busch, and he's like, Brad Keselowski. Just doesn't even think about it and just says it. And that's the kind of guy you want to be your villain, and not someone like Denny Hamlin.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would expect Kyle Busch to say. And my big thing with Kyle Busch is, you go back to last year with the Cup Series race, the championship race, where I can't remember which lap car it was. I want to say it was whoever was in the 32 car. But late in the race, Martin Truex Jr. is leading the race, and Kyle Busch is trying to reel him in. Kyle struggled to get around the lap car, whoever it was. I think it was Matt Benedetto. And afterwards, Kyle Busch voiced his displeasure in his interview. He must have forgot the day before in the Xfinity race when his teammate Ryan Preece did the same exact thing to Elliott Sadler. Actually, put Elliott Sadler in the wall racing for him. So yeah, Kyle Busch is. I think he likes that role, which is good, and that's what I like about Kyle Busch is I don't ever want him to change. I don't. I think Kyle Busch all of a sudden came out and he signed autographs, which I'm sure he still does, and kissed babies and said all the right things. Yeah, it'd be good for him or it'd make him look better, but to me it wouldn't be him being him. I think the thing with NASCAR, because it's maybe the most corporate sport in the United States, is we all want most of these guys shut up. They do what their sponsor tells them to do, and they go about it, and that's how they function. You look at a guy like Jimmy Johnson. I mean, he's the most corporate one of all of them. Kyle Busch isn't like that. He's authentic. He's real. He's the type of guy. You go, and you race at a dirt track. I work at one in the summer. Most of the time, when you ask a guy who finishes second or third or fourth that had a really fast car at the end of the night, he probably doesn't have something good to say about whoever beat him for whatever reason. Yeah. And that's Kyle.
Well, yeah, and you bring up local dirt tracks. This is you're talking about local dirt tracks where you're racing for like $100.
Yeah,
and these guys that finish fourth are just they're angry.
They're breaking even if they're lucky.
And so to get into NASCAR and go, well, you finished third and you led 112 laps and you should have won the race, but third's great. It's good to see someone go, no, third's not great. Yeah. I'm supposed to be winning these things.
His interviews are my favorite. They're his, Bill Belichick and Greg Popovich interviews are my favorite in all professional sports because you're going to get blatant honesty. He will tell you, we sucked.
And Kyle Busch has definitely rubbed off on Noah Gragson. If you watched Noah Gragson's interview after finishing second in the truck race, he did not care. He was frustrated. He was mad, and he basically did a Kyle Busch interview after finishing second.
He's fine with me, so I hope he doesn't change. I don't like him. That's fine. I'm okay with not liking him. Someone needs to be the bad guy. And people can call him whiny. They can call him a crybaby. That's okay. Sometimes he does come across that way. But if he wasn't him, then it wouldn't be the same. You know, and the NASCAR has been built up by a lot of corporate, I don't want to call them phonies, but they've been really corporatized. And it's good to have a guy like a Kyle Busch who'll just tell you what he thinks. If he sucks, he sucked. If someone made him mad, they made him mad, and he'll tell you. And I think Brad Keselowski's kind of just below that, but he's not the same. And I don't know that maybe he will be in time. But I don't know. So Kyle Busch, don't ever change. Let's move on now real quickly to our predictions for this week in all three series. Last week we didn't pick the truck series. I don't know about you. I probably wouldn't have picked Brett Moffitt.
Nope.
Yeah, I would probably went Kyle Busch.
I would have gone Kyle Busch as well.
I would have either gone Kyle Busch or maybe Noah Gragson. But this week we'll go ahead and we'll jump in to picking the Camping World Truck Series race. The name of it is escaping me off the top of my head, so I'm just going to call it the Camping World Truck Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Jacob, I will let you make your pick first. Who is taking home the win? It's Friday night, right?
Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on Fox Sports 1.
So who is picking up the win in that?
Kyle Busch.
Yeah, I'm going with Kyle Busch too. I didn't want to. I tried to find many ways not to. But you think about it, it's Kyle Busch's home track, and you look at the youth in this class and at that track, I couldn't foresee a scenario. I wanted to go with a guy like maybe a Matt Crafton, but I couldn't foresee a scenario where someone got it done.
Well, and after what happened last week, I think Kyle Busch is going to be driving angry, even though it's the truck series, and he's going to want to make up for what happened last week.
Yeah, so I think we're both on the same page there. Kyle Busch gets the win. Let's move on to the Xfinity Series. That race will be on Saturday afternoon. Do you know the start time for that? I haven't.
It is at 4 p.m. Eastern, also on Fox
3
Sports
o'clock
1.
our time on Fox Sports 1. Last week, I went with Kevin Harvick at Atlanta. I got the win. You went with Christopher Bell. Not a bad pick. He ran well. Who are you taking this week?
Looking through the entry list right now, this one's a little bit more difficult to pick than the truck race, because what we're seeing, and we talked about this before, is you're not seeing a whole lot of Cup drivers in the cars of the Xfinity Series this week. So but other than that, there's still Kyle Busch, there's still Ryan Blaney, and
Austin Dillon,
Kyle Larson,
and I think Austin Dillon this week too, isn't he?
Yeah, but that 3 car has not run well in the Xfinity Series for a long time. So between those 3, unfortunately, I'm picking between those 3, and I think Kyle Busch is going to go ahead and win the Xfinity race as well.
I was going to go that way, and I'm glad I didn't. I was kind of torn between this as well, between Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, and Ryan Blaney. I'm going to go with Ryan Blaney. He doesn't have a ton of seat time at that track. He does in the Truck Series, but not so much in the Cup and Xfinity Series. But I think that car, Penske, runs really, really well at Las Vegas. And I'm going to go with Ryan Blaney to pick up the win in the Xfinity Series on Saturday. And we'll jump in now to the Monster Energy Cup Series race. That's on Sunday afternoon. What is the official start time for that, Jacob?
Official start time will be 2:30 Central Time.
So
this one is on Fox, though.
Yeah, it's on Fox. And hopefully they'll be able to. They won't have any. It's Las Vegas, so don't get a ton of rain. So hopefully there won't be a rain delay or anything like we had this past week in Atlanta.
One real quick on that rain delay. The rain delay wasn't actually as long as it seemed because they moved the start time up an hour. So they really only started about an hour after they were supposed to originally start, but then it became 2 hours after they moved the start up. So it was kind of a little bit of a mess for NASCAR in that regard. But, yeah, I don't think we'll have any trouble in Vegas with the rain delay this weekend.
No, I don't think so. Normally you don't have a trouble with rain in Vegas. So let's go to those picks. Last week I went with Kevin Harvick. He picked up the win. You went with Ryan Blaney, who I believe finished 12th, if I remember correctly, and he just kind of stayed around there that whole race. This is a track that Ryan Blaney, I think, runs really well at. Does he get the win this week, or who are you picking?
Well, I can tell you I'm going to be picking a Ford. I can't pick against those guys right now, and I really honestly want to pick a Clint Boyer to win this race. I think he's really picking things up, but I'm picking Brad Keselowski to win this race. Finished second last week. The Fords and even him run really well on 1.5 miles, so I think Brad Keselowski wins this week, and you'll see some challenge from Joey Logano, as well as I think Kevin Harvick will be back up there, but I think it's going to be dominated by the Fords again this weekend.
I'm going to go with Brad Keselowski as well. I'd kind of made up my mind that I was torn between him, Logano, or Blaney, but I want to see more from Blaney at Vegas in the Cup car before I go with him. Logano just hasn't been able to close the deal at Vegas, and Brad Keselowski, this is his track. This is a track he runs really, really well at, and I'm going to go with Brad Keselowski to win at Las Vegas, as did you. So that means he's probably going to finish a lap down, or DNF, something like that. So
yeah, so not a good start to the weekend for Brad Keselowski.
Yeah, I know he's got way better things to do than listen to this podcast in Maryville, Missouri. But if he does, man, he's going to be disappointed. So yeah, we're both going with Brad Keselowski in the Cup Series. Jacob takes Kyle Busch in the Xfinity Series. I'm going to take Ryan Blaney, and we both take Kyle Busch in the Truck Series. So there's our picks for this week at Las Vegas. All 3 races can be viewed this weekend. The Truck Series on Friday night, the Xfinity Series on Saturday afternoon, and the Cup Series on Sunday afternoon. That'll do it for this week's episode of the No Caution Podcast. We'll be back here next week. We'll look ahead to the next race on the schedule, which is at MIS?
I think it was ISM.
Phoenix International Raceway is what it should be. It's the racetrack in Phoenix, everyone. And we will look ahead to that week of racing next week. For Jacob Blair, this is Trevor Maynard on the No Caution Podcast.